Welcome, everyone. We hope you've been keeping safe, and we thank you for joining today, DoubleRadius, as we host Gamma Electronics for today's webinar on RF weatherproofing made easy. My name is Rachel List, and I'm an account manager here at DoubleRadius. For those who aren't familiar with them, Gamma Electronics specializes in cable assembly, protection, and identification. And joining us today to make our presentation is Cameron Lanier, Gamma's Director of Marketing and Media Communications. Before I turn it over to Cameron, just a few housekeeping reminders. One, we'll be addressing questions throughout the presentation, so please enter any questions you have into the question box. Two, when the webinar is over, please take a moment to provide your feedback by answering the questions that will appear on the screen. In addition to the questions, there will also be an opportunity to sign up for a free sample, so stay tuned for that. And with that, let's jump right in. I'll hand it over to Cameron from Gamma Electronics to get us started.
Awesome. Thank you, Rachel. Appreciate it. And we really appreciate, you guys can hear me, right? I want to make sure I'm being heard first of all.
Loud and clear over here.
Awesome. Good to hear. All right. So thank you for having us first and foremost. And yeah, we're excited to be here and we'll just jump right in. So we are Gamma Electronics, and with me today, very briefly anyway, I have Lisa Schlegg. So as Rachel kind of mentioned, we are Gamma Electronics. My name is Cameron Lanier. I'm the Director of Marketing here. And Lisa is with me. She is our WISP account manager. And we're trying to practice social distancing. So she's going to actually leave us here. But we want to start off and at least let her say hi.
Hello, everybody. I hope you enjoy the presentation. You're going to learn a lot.
And Lisa, Rachel, you actually mentioned the samples, and that'll come up a little later. And Lisa will be the one to help out with that. So we wanted to introduce her real quick. So,
awesome. Well, thank you very much, and you guys enjoy. I will go sign in, and so we can continue with our social distancing.
Lisa's going to try to distract me here with messages during this webinar, or hopefully not. I'm kidding. All right, let's move along here. So for those who are not familiar with us, we are Gamma Electronics, and we are based out of California, Southern California specifically. We're just about an hour outside of Los Angeles. And so we measure things, we measure distance and time here. I don't know if that's the same everywhere, but right now we're an hour outside of, or we're usually an hour outside of Los Angeles. It gets worse in traffic. And right now it might be closer to 45 minutes thanks to the quarantine. But we don't want to talk too much about the quarantine today. We all have that kind of the forefront of our minds. We'd like to move on to more interesting topics. And so with that said, we are born from the world of aero defense. And really what that means is we came into this industry, or really our company started as a heat shrink company. And we still continue to be a heat shrink company. And we do work with companies like Bell Helicopter, Boeing, Lockheed Martin. We continue to work with these companies and customers. And we still have strong connections there and do a lot of heat shrink. However, in recent years, we've become better known as the cold shrink guys. We've literally been referred to as the cold shrink guys at trade shows when we've run into people. So we've embraced this title. We're totally okay with it. And we enjoy being the cold shrink guys. So there's a story of how we kind of segued from one to the other, and we'll get there in a minute. But from cold shrink, we've actually branched even further into the world of RF weatherproofing. We've added to that product line. And really what we've tried to do is, because of adding to this product line and it becoming one of our biggest, most successful product lines, we've become known more so as a RF weatherproofing company. And our whole goal with weatherproofing is to develop weatherproofing products that save you, the users or customers, time and money. We want to really make products that help you. And so with that said, the point of today's webinar is really to dive into some of the lessons we've learned about weatherproofing and how it can really make your life easier. And with that said, there were some valuable lessons we've learned along the way. And the one big one we want to talk about today is kind of what the mindset of the carriers is on weatherproofing. And by carriers, I mean the big boys, ATT, Verizon, and now T-Mobile, since Sprint is going to pretty much be going away. So with all that said, we have a lot of things we've learned in this world, and we want to share. So first and foremost, our relationship with Cold Shrink began really with AT&T, and it actually began with them talking to us about, well, we're a heat shrink company, do we know anything about cold shrink? They were already using cold shrink, they loved the idea of cold shrink, and they wanted to continue to use it, but they came to us and said, is there a way we can play with a different version of cold shrink, that we can develop something new and improved? And so we kind of played with this idea, and there's a whole story there that I won't get into all the details on, but if you're not familiar with cold shrink, the first thing to know is that cold shrink is similar to heat shrink in that it starts at a larger size and it shrinks down to a smaller size. The difference is heat shrink requires heat, whereas cold shrink, it has this inner perforated plastic tubing, and that tubing, you pull that little ripcord in there, and as you pull it, it shrinks all on its own. So there's no heat required. And with no heat, it makes it a lot easier to install, especially if you're up on a tower. And we also have no adhesive in it. A lot of heat shrink products have adhesive. Cold shrink does not have adhesive. So AT&T came to us wanting a new and improved version of cold shrink, because the version they were working with is made from a material called EPDM. And it's been around for quite some time. There were some old CXS models that they were using that were just not watertight. They weren't grabbing down to the cable or the connector as tight as AT&T would have liked. And so that's why they were asking, they said they like the concept, how do we improve it? And to make a very long story short, from this, we developed silicone cold shrink. And silicone was and is the new and improved version of cold shrink. It's amazing stuff. And to briefly address why, there are some key differences between silicone and EPDM cold shrink. The first is temperature related, in terms of what temperatures the two materials can resist. So for example, EPDM has actually a pretty stellar temperature resistance. It goes down, as you can see on the chart, to -40, all the way up to 130 degrees Celsius. It's really pretty stellar, which in Fahrenheit, it's -40 up to 266 degrees. So it's pretty amazing. But silicone beats it, and down to -60 Celsius up to 230 degrees Celsius. It's really a stellar improvement on what was already a good temperature resistant product. But the big difference between silicone and EPDM, and the one that really made the difference, is silicone's shrink ratio is just far superior. So if you look here, this little GIF or GIF, whichever term you prefer, shows the difference between EPDM and silicone's shrink ratios. So EPDM shrinks down about 3 times smaller than where it began, whereas silicone goes 5 times smaller than where it began. It's really impressive. And what made this so important is you can look at this, let me go back, this EPDM over here, and the EPDM often comes with a little foam strip. And the point of this foam strip is because the EPDM doesn't shrink down far enough to really make the connection watertight. They have to include this foam strip to make up the difference. Well, silicone, you don't need the foam strip. It makes up the difference all on its own. So silicone cold shrink helped make the install process easier, and it's a more watertight product. Plus, on top of it, it's more resistant to more extreme temperatures. So silicone just blew EPDM out of the water. It became a huge hit. And since we're on the topic of the differences between the two of them, I wanted to briefly address, because we get this question a fair amount, well, how do I know the difference? Because they look very similar, which one's which? Silicone, if you look at it, kind of has this glossy shine to it. And in our part number, gamma SDL, the S actually stands for silicone. So that's one key way you can see we printed on there. Whereas EPDM has no gloss or shine to it. It's just a flat, kind of matted look to it. So those two products, you can quickly, using that visual identifier, kind of figure out which is which. Well, it's incredibly easy to install. It works very well. And to showcase it very quickly here, we have a very short video on how to install our silicone cold shrink. Now, if you didn't catch that, that installed in less than 15 seconds. The video is in its entirety, it is 15 seconds long, and it installed in less time than that. The video is not doctored. We did not change anything. It literally takes that long to install it. I want to play it one more time in case anyone missed it. So you just remove that inner plastic core and it rips right out of there, and the cold shrink installs within seconds, literally. And you can imagine that AT&T was kind of excited about this, and they approved it in 2015 as one of their main weatherproofing products. And for those of you who might be familiar with the FirstNet build that's going on right now, FirstNet is a network that AT&T won the bid on to build a network for first responders throughout all 50 of the United States. So we're on all of those towers, and we're very proud of that and honored to be part of that project. And so really the reason we're going into this whole history of cold shrink is to let you know a little bit about Gamma, but also more importantly, this is the crux of the conversation we want to get to today. And we wanted to provide you some of the background that would help here. But why? Why did AT&T want cold shrink? There are other options of weatherproofing. Why did they come to us wanting that specific product? And why do they continue to use it? Because it was approved in 2015. It still continues to be used, and they love it. So when I talk about other products, the easiest one for us to compare to here is going to be tape and butyl. So you're going to hear me talk a lot about that and do some comparisons here. And so we got so much feedback specifically about cold shrink and how fast and easy it was to install that we for sure thought the main reason that AT&T wanted cold shrink was because of its install time. I mean, as you saw, it took less than a minute to install, far less than a minute to install. And so we got into conversations with AT&T and some other telecom companies about this topic. And as we talked about it, we found out some interesting information. So for example, we found out that most towers have about 35 to 70 cables that go up on the tower when they roll them out. However, to make the math easy, we just took a nice average and said 50 cables, which translates to 100 different connections on each tower when they roll them out. Well, if you do the quick math here, if we said cold shrink takes 1 minute to install on each connection, you're talking 100 minutes or an hour and 40 minutes. Now that's on the high side. Cold shrink should install in much less time than that, as we saw in the video. It can really install in less than 15 seconds. It might take a little longer in some instances, but it's pretty darn fast. Now, if you compare that with something like tape and butyl, we've heard from a lot of feedback, and we went out and did a lot of surveying and got a lot of feedback. Minimum we heard is 5 minutes, and that's on the fast side for tape and butyl. So right there, you're doing a comparison of 100 versus 500 minutes, or 1 hour and 40 minutes, probably more like an hour and a half or less compared to a full work day and more of 8 hours with tape and butyl. Now, the thing is again, if we said cold shrink is 1 minute, that's kind of cold shrink at its worst, whereas tape and butyl is at its best at 5 minutes. More likely, it's going to take around 10 minutes to do it per connection, which translates to 2 full days on 100 different connections. 2 full days of work just to do your weatherproofing. If you're in bad circumstances, we've had guys tell us it could take as much as 15 or even 20 minutes, which means you're looking at 25 hours or 3 full work days just for your weatherproofing. So we for sure thought this must be the reason AT&T, they're going to reduce the amount of work, the amount of install time on their front end, and reduce it so vastly. It must be the main reason that they wanted cold shrink. However, they were quick to tell us that is not the reason. There were other considerations in why they wanted cold shrink. So we got into other topics. Accessibility, as you can see on this radio unit. It's less than 1 inch between the connections. Fitting tape and butyl specifically between those connections is going to be a beast of a job. And so specifically when you look at, this is a diplexer often used by carriers. Specifically, I believe this one's often used by T-Mobile. And if you look at this one, fitting a lot of different cables in there, plus tape, plus butyl, especially if you're doing a courtesy wrap on the tape, plus butyl, then another wrapping of tape, it's a beast. So we thought, okay, accessibility is another reason. It's just so much easier to install it, plus the install time is so much faster. But again, it was not the primary reason that they liked cold shrink. One thing they did bring up to us, and I'll spoiler alert, it's not the primary reason they liked cold shrink, but something they told us that was very insightful was the quality control. With cold shrink, AT&T felt that they could better ensure the quality of the install itself. With tape and butyl, it's hard to guarantee. One installer versus another installer, they're going to install it different ways. The experience of the installer could impact the quality of it vastly, whereas really almost anyone can install cold shrink and do it right, and it won't take much experience at all. Now, like I said, it was not the primary reason that they wanted cold shrink, but it was a huge consideration for them, which makes sense when you think about how many installs they have going out. So the primary reason for AT&T is maintenance. And what's funny is, yeah, when you think about it, it makes a ton of sense. It's just we got so much feedback on the install side. We thought it was all about the install. That was the reason that people love cold shrink. But really, it's all about maintenance. And when you boil this down, it makes so much sense. More maintenance visits mean more time, more money, and essentially it's hurting your bottom line. Okay, and a study was done a couple years back which showed that maintenance costs on all these towers, all these builds, are approximately 49%, or pretty much half of your operational costs. If you're AT&T or T-Mobile or whomever, that literally translates to billions of dollars. So of course they want to drop their maintenance costs. Of course that's their top consideration. When it's half of their costs are maintenance, yes, they want to cut that cost down, and that is their primary concern. And the top reason for maintenance, bad weatherproofing. And it sounds easy for me to say that coming from the fact that we're an RF weatherproofing company, but we've done our research and we got this specifically from telecom Tiger teams. If you're not familiar with Tiger teams, often in the telecom world, the telecom world breaks up installs and repairs and maintenance into two teams, and Tiger teams address the maintenance and repair side. They, without fail, always tell us weatherproofing, 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 and have gone as far as to estimate that about 30% of their maintenance calls are due to weather-related issues, which makes it pretty much the top reason they have, or the top reason for maintenance calls. The other 70 or so percent, gets split up between a cable or an antenna issue or a radio issue or whatever, but to have almost 1/3 of it be weather related is an enormous issue. So that brings us to the next question. What's wrong with the weatherproofing? How do we get this addressed? How do we help solve this problem? Well, not to oversimplify it, but to oversimplify it, the weatherproofing just doesn't work or it doesn't last. All right, and to explain that, I want to actually use a couple previous examples. So the first one is it doesn't work. Okay, the EPDM cold shrink's a great example of this because it just has shrink ratio issues. It doesn't shrink down far enough. So it's not watertight. Even if you use it with this foam strip is not as weather resistant. It's going to let in more water. It's not going to handle temperature as well as the rubber material. It's just not going to work as well as it's supposed to work, and you're going to have maintenance issues. So the second issue, where things don't last, tape and butyl is another great example of this. Now I know we got a great looking photo of tape and butyl here, but point being is it has a lot of issues that cause it to not last. The first is it has temperature issues. We kind of addressed how silicone and even EPDM help address those issues. Tape and butyl do not. Tape and butyl, unfortunately, if you look at them, butyl in the cold, it gets brittle and it breaks down. It cracks. In the heat, it warms up and it becomes runny or oozes, and it often causes VSWR issues or return loss issues because it gets into the connector. So you have a lot of problems with that butyl within a year. Most of the Tiger teams tell us about 1 year of time, and that butyl is going to be essentially useless. Similar for the tape. The tape, because of the adhesive, if you think about electrical tape, it's designed for use indoors. So when you use it on a cable outdoors, the adhesive just doesn't hold up. It's going to unravel, and it's going to completely defeat the purpose of it being up there. And it's going to happen, especially in more extreme temperatures, very quickly. But in almost any temperature, it's going to happen fairly quickly, unless it's meant for indoor use. You use it outdoors, it's just not going to work, and it's not going to work in the near future. So with that in mind, silicone cold shrink addressed all of those issues. It's going to last, it's going to work in extreme temperatures, it installs easily, it has pretty much everything AT&T wanted and more. Specifically, they wanted to address the maintenance issue, but it went beyond that. And so it was a huge win. And one of the things we love to cite is that since we have been working with AT&T in 2015, they have not reported a single failure of cold shrink to us, not even once. And so that's an amazing statistic when you consider they've been used for 5+ years now, and tape and butyl breaks down in less than a year. So from that, we've kind of developed our tagline of our weatherproofing installs in seconds and lasts a lifetime. And we've tested it to last far beyond these 5 years. Now, that again, just to reiterate, why does AT&T then use cold shrink? Because it reduces their maintenance and it reduces their costs. And the big point to address here today, the one thing I want to come away with today is if you're looking at weatherproofing, you need to approach it with maintenance in mind. Too often we talk to people and they think about the install side. They think about, well, tape and butyl, let's be honest, it's cheap. But as they say, you get what you pay for. And so a lot of times we've talked to people and they said, well, it's included and it's just easy. It's right there. I don't have to buy something separate. Cold shrink's a little more expensive, all that kind of stuff. Okay, but you're going to pay for it. And that's kind of my next point here is if you get weatherproofing wrong during the installation phase, you're going to pay for it in maintenance in the long run. Excuse me, in the long run. And so you don't want to have that problem. Choose the right weatherproofing from the get-go. And that's where you want to try to make, my wife and I have a saying, when we try to make our big purchases, we always say buy once, buy right. And that's kind of the mentality you want with your weatherproofing. Make it a one-time cost as much as you can. There will always be some maintenance. It's going to happen, but make it a one-time cost as much as you can and make that decision from the get-go. And again, that's why we know AT&T and others love cold shrink. And that's, again, where this tagline, it installs in seconds, as you saw in the video, but we guarantee it will last the lifetime of the cable. So that's kind of cold shrink in a nutshell. I'm going to also address some other weatherproofing concepts and products. But before I do, I wanted to ask if there's any questions to address. All right.
I don't see any questions, Cameron.
All right, then I will move on. So the thing about weatherproofing is we get the question about cold shrink specifically. Well, what if I don't want to use cold shrink? What if, for XYZ reason? Well, that's why we developed other weatherproofing products. So we know one size does not fit all and that we need other options. And so we've branched into other options. Specifically, we started with the cold shrink and made it in different sizes. These are 4 of our 5 sizes. We have a 5th size that's made specifically for AT&T, their power connections, and we don't have the power connection on hand to get a photo with, so it's not there right now. But point being, the other 4 are there. These are the ones that are commonly used outside of AT&T. And you can see we've purposely designed them to match up with certain connections and cables, and we guarantee they will work on these. Doesn't mean that they will only work on these. They can also work on other sizes, but these are the ones we know and can guarantee. And something we're excited about is recently we've been testing out the smaller model, the SDL TNS65 with Next 10 connectors, which are growing in popularity right now. So, oh, I'm skipping ahead. And with that also said, we have, it can also match down to an LMR 195. Now you can see here, it says with Gamma LMR 195 only. And to talk about that briefly, LMR 195 is a very small cable. And so we wanted to make sure there were no shrink ratio issues like what happens with the EPDM. So to help address that, because we came from the world of heat shrink, what we did is we actually made our own LMR 195 cable with a larger heat shrink closer to the connector that builds up the diameter of the cable so that when you install the TNS65 on there, it gives you a watertight, guaranteed watertight connect or seal. So we developed that, and if you're using 195 cables, I would highly recommend you look into that. We also know a lot of guys are, trying to color code when they're up on towers, and so we were asked if we could make cold shrink in different colors, and so we have red, blue, and also black, obviously. So those are available to you as well. So those are a few variations on the cold shrink itself, and that's easily our most popular product, but we know that there are other considerations to make out there. And so with that, we have some other products outside of cold shrink, and amongst them we have of course the cold shrink, and then a few others: the slide lock, our weatherproof boots, and magic tape. So I want to just talk briefly about these and why you might use them versus cold shrink, and address any questions you guys might have. So first of all, I want to address what our goals are with all of our weatherproofing products. First and foremost, it's obviously got to provide incredible weather protection. That's a given. And so we don't want any issues. It's got to serve its purpose first and foremost. But with that, it's got to also last. There are weatherproofing products that can work, but if they don't work for very long, then it's not really a great solution. So we didn't want to be that. And then last of all, we like the added benefit of our products being fast and easy to install. So all of our products, we had these three things in mind. And with that, the slide lock specifically is a very easy to install and fantastic weatherproofing product. It has this cool inner gel. It's made of silicone, so we know that the temperature resistant properties are there. And then it's got this outer plastic exterior that holds up to the weather very well. And what's really cool about this is it's got this little sliding lock mechanism, and it allows you to just install it very quickly. You pop the sliding lock up and over, and it just locks into place. And when you do that, you can see this gel here. The gel, this is made to AT&T specifications. So this is another product that they approved. And the gel, you can see it closes, as this kind of has this clamshell closing mechanism to it. The gel goes up and over the top of the connector. They specifically, they being AT&T, they told us they wanted it to close and ooze out of that slide lock. So we put the gel protection in there, and you can see it oozing out the top when it's installed on a connection there. And that way they could kind of quality control it and make sure that their installers see it before they walk away from it. The biggest reason that they like this, AT&T and others, over something like cold shrink is because it's reusable. Now it's reusable to a point. Because it can be a permanent solution that you just leave up there. If you leave it up there for 5 years, well, the gel is going to kind of mold around what it's been on for 5 years, and it may not be, it may not bounce back and mold itself to a new connection after 5 years. But if it's been a couple months, it's probably not a big deal. Even a little more than that is probably not a big deal. And we like to tell people you can reuse it a handful of times, but if you're using it as a permanent solution and leaving it up there for years, you're probably going to want to swap it out after it's been up there for such a long time. Here is a quick install video showing how fast and easy slide lock is to install. And you can see the gel oozing out the top there. And again, not doctored, that is how quick and easy it is to install the slide lock. Like I said, it's ATT approved. It gets heavily used by them as well. And we've made it in a few different variations. The only thing that's kind of a bummer about the slide lock is that it's not really a bummer, it just got to be made specifically so that we can guarantee the results. It's got to be made specifically to both the connector and the cable size to make it truly watertight. And so we do that on purpose. It just means there's not as many variations of the product itself. So you can see there are 3 variations there that we know they work on. And if you have a need for that, it's a fantastic product that you can reuse. And it's a really awesome option available to you. So any questions before I move on to the next thing?
Hey, Cameron, a couple of questions. One, the question regarding the cold shrink is how easy is it to remove?
Well, it's much easier than something like heat shrink or tape and butyl. You can take a knife to it, a blade, and cut it off. Obviously, you got to be careful about cutting the cable if you do so. It's tricky. It's much easier than something like I said, tape and butyl. The difficult part is you just don't want to cut the cable. But because there's no adhesive or anything, it's far easier than other solutions. It's just unfortunately not reusable.
Any options for SMA connectors?
We are currently testing some things on them, but we are specifically looking at possibly some cold shrink options for that.
Great. And last for now, does the slide lock goo come off?
No, it's not like butyl, which gets runny, or I know installers have told us it gets on their gloves, all that kind of stuff. No, it stays in there. Other than oozing out a little bit when you install it, it works great and it stays in place.
Great, thanks, Cameron.
Awesome. All right, we'll move on. So the next one is our weatherproof boots. And the weatherproof boots, you can see we have a few different variations here, and they're a really cool little product. And to dive into that, they are also made of a silicone rubber. You can tell we love silicone because it's so temperature resistant and it just works so well as a weatherproofing product. So we love to use it whenever we can. So it's made of a silicone rubber. And the only thing about the boots is it's got to be installed on the cable before termination. We have had guys try to install them after. It can be a bit of a beast and may not work, especially over something like a 7/16 DIN connector. But they are a fantastic product, and there's no product that is easier to install and uninstall off of the connector than a boot. They're fantastic. And to showcase that, here's a very quick video again, showcasing the install. So I may play it a little slow. I'm going to try playing it one more time and see if we can get it playing a little smoother. There we go. But you can see how quickly it just pops up and over, and you can hear that little popping sound. That popping sound is actually the air inside the boot, because it's so water and airtight. It pushes the air out when you're installing it over the connector. So it's a really cool product. And it uninstalls just as easily. I mean, it takes a little bit of a pull, but then it pops up and over the connector and gets you that watertight connection again. So the question we kind of get about the boots is, do they really work? And the thing is they're deceptively simple. That's the term I like to use with them, because they seem so easy and so simple. How could it work that well? And they really do work that well. There's a lot of technology actually packed into these little things. And by that, I mean, yes, you got to use the right material, but they have to be perfectly sized for the connector, for the cable, to really guarantee results. And we've gone to great lengths to make sure that they are perfectly sized to guarantee those results. You can see here, they are sized perfectly on the connector side, but they have to be sized correctly on the inside of the boot so it can fit up and over the connection while having room in the boot to do so, while making it watertight. There's a lot going on in this little thing. And you can see that kind of on the connector side as well, where it's, or sorry, the cable side. Because here on the cable side, you've got, you know, this smaller cable here, the larger cable here, and the ridges built in to kind of add a layer of weather protection so that water can't drip down. And it's just a lot packed into these things to make them watertight. And they are IP68 rated. For any familiar with the IP rating system, that's true for also the slide locks and the cold shrink. So we also have right angle boots available. And these have grown in popularity as well because it's very hard to water or weather protect right angle connections. And yet with the boots, you have that option available to you. They're a little more difficult to put on than the other boots. But if you get some lubricant, it goes on pretty easily and you get great results. And we have a few variations in sizes you can see there. Now, mentioning variations, we have quite a few and we continue to add to them. So you can see here's just a few variations we have on different connections and what size cables we have that they can fit to. We're really excited. We can start announcing this now. Our standard 1/2 inch on the 7/16 DIN and the 4310 boots are they now work with JMA connections. So we resized both these boots just ever so slightly so that they can now work on those connections when it goes to a standard 1/2 inch cable or an annular cable. So we are rolling those out. They will be added to our website next week, but anyone who's doing field termination and using JMA specifically, we now have that option available to you. So the boots are becoming, like I said, increasingly popular. They're a great solution. They kind of give you that permanent solution, but allow you to re-access the cable as needed. And they're a great little product. Does anyone have any questions about the boots before I move on?
Cameron, a couple, maybe some questions on the boots here, but just a quick clarifying question back on the slide lock.
Sure.
Looking for some more clarification on the goo, and does it leave a residue?
No, it really just kind of sits there and protects against the water, against water ingress. And no, it will separate from the cable easily when you remove it.
Great. And then for the right angle, what lubricant do you recommend so not to damage the material?
I'm not exactly sure if I want to recommend a specific one at this time. Maybe DoubleRadius would actually be better at doing that, but we can possibly get back to you on that. But that's probably a better question to ask DoubleRadius.
Okay, great. That's all the questions for now.
Awesome. All right. So the last weatherproofing product we want to talk about is Magic Tape. And Magic Tape is a fantastic product. It's made from ethylene propylene rubber, which is the same kind of material that EPDM is made from. So not quite as weather resistant or temperature resistant, I should say, as silicone, but still a fantastic solution. It still holds up to some pretty extreme temperatures. And it has no adhesive, which, if you've been listening to the whole webinar, you can probably tell that's a big deal for us. We try to steer away from adhesives in outdoor products because adhesives tend to break down in extreme temperatures. So Magic Tape's really great in that it doesn't have adhesive, and many of you might know it as self-amalgamating or self-fusing tape. So it's got this protective layer here that keeps it from adhering to itself when it's shipped. You remove that layer and then it fuses to itself as you stretch it over itself and around the connection. It will adhere to itself. The only issue with it is that you can't guarantee the install results. So it's not as easy to install, not quite as quick and easy as the others, but you also, the boots, the slide lock, the cold shrink, all of them are going to you can pretty much guarantee that almost any installer will install those correctly. The magic tape, there's a little more iffy there. It's a little more questionable. And so you want to make sure that when someone's going out with magic tape, they know exactly how to use it so that you can get the results you want out of it. And with that, here's a 30-second video, a little longer than the others, that showcases some of the features of the magic tape. So there you go, the magic tape, especially if you're using electrical tape and you like tape, this is a far simpler solution. It doesn't have adhesive, so it's not going to break down the same way. It's a really great solution. It's pretty awesome as far as tapes go. So that kind of brings us to the next big thing, and we get this question a fair amount. When do I use each? So it's a fair question. We like to consider our cold shrink as the set it and forget it solution. So if you feel pretty confident, like AT&T, like they feel like they got their antennas dialed in and their radios, and they feel like they got a good working system, they really just want to put weatherproofing on there and not worry about it, great, go with cold shrink. However, if you feel like, yeah, you're not feeling quite as confident and you might need to swap out that cable, it might be worth it to look at the slide lock, specifically if you know you have a cable / connector that fit the slide lock exactly. The boots have more variations than the slide lock specifically. And the only thing is you've got to make sure that that boot can be installed before the cable is terminated in order to get the results you want out of it. If you're able to get that, that's becoming a hugely preferred product by a lot of guys, although AT&T continues to use cold shrink. The last one is the magic tape, and we put here no other options, and that kind of sounds like we're down on the magic tape, and the magic tape's a great product. The thing is I would prefer the other 3 products over it almost any day. The problem is there's going to be situations where you need the magic tape. There's going to be, you know, if you go up and you find that something is broken and, you know, a cable's got a nick in it, or something happened to one of a piece of weatherproofing that you didn't know about, well, at least have the magic tape in your bag so that you can make a quick repair and then come back later or what have you. But it's really great to just have on hand at all times in case you need it, and in case you come up to a weird connection that you don't know how to weatherproof another way, then I would always have it available. But more often than not, I'm going to try to go with one of the other 3 if I have the option. So with that said, out of all these products, we've kind of become the go-to weatherproofing company in the telecom industry, and we're very proud of the longevity, the ability of our products, but also how easy they make the installation process. And to kind of showcase that, we have one last video here where we can showcase the install time of all 3 of our big products, the weatherproofing products. All of them install back to back in less than 30 seconds. And there you go. Oh, okay. So I do have one last topic that I want to address that's related to weatherproofing, but it's not quite weatherproofing. But before I do, I want to ask if there are any other weatherproofing related questions before I move on.
Yeah, Cameron, on the topic of the magic tape, someone reports that they always tape up, not down. Does it make a difference with the magic tape?
I'm not sure if it does. We've done it both ways. I don't know if I've seen that different of a result. But you know, we haven't done a ton of studies on that or anything, or testing on it, and it's something we could look into for sure.
And then can the magic tape be reused if the connector has to be removed for any reason?
No, not really. The magic tape, because it kind of molds itself around that connection, when you cut it off, it pretty much has molded itself around it and it won't be reusable. But it's because there's no adhesive, it is pretty easy to cut off. Similar to cold shrink, you just got to be, they're both pretty easy to cut off. You just got to be careful. You don't want to nick the cable. And I don't want to say too much, but we're also working on a solution for that.
Great, thank you.
Awesome. So the last thing I want to address very quickly here is cable assemblies. And the reason I want to bring it up is because we actually started getting a lot of questions about, well, if I want boots specifically, and they come on the cable, they're more watertight when it comes on the cable, then what do I got to do? And yes, we sell them on their own, but we do sell them with cables to address this issue. So we have a number of cables. We have low PIM cables, which specifically if you are branching into the CBRS world, you're going to most likely be using LTE and you need low PIM cables. And so we have low PIM cables. They're a little more expensive than the low loss cables, but they deliver far superior results. And we recently added the Next 10 as a connector available on our low PIM cables. Also, we have low loss cables. So you've got your LMRs here specifically, and you can see there's that GMR we were talking about earlier. And lastly, if you build your own, if you want to do your own cable assemblies, we can facilitate that as well. So we have a few different options here in terms of these are low PIM coax cables you can buy from us, and you can go build your own cable to your heart's desire. So those are some options. Now, specifically, we did this largely so that people could get boots on the cable, but we don't only do boots. You can also do it with cold shrink. So you can get a cable with cold shrink, cable with boots, whatever you prefer. You can mix and match it. You can do cable boot on one side and cold shrink on the other. We will play with all those variations. Here's the big thing we want you to know about it is if you purchase these things separately, for example, you could buy a low PIM cable for $50, which is actually a very good price for a low PIM cable. And if you add cold shrink to it, your price goes up fairly significantly to $82. However, if you buy all of this together, you're looking at cable plus cold shrink for $70, and it's one SKU. So you've brought down the total price of the cable $12, which if you're doing 50 cables on a tower, okay, that's $600 you just saved by buying this all kitted together. So it's fairly significant savings if you are planning and you're doing it right, and not just going out there and throwing tape and butyl up there without putting too much thought into your weatherproofing. So you can get great cables with great weatherproofing at a killer price. And with that, I also want to mention we have the LMR 195 with the SDL TNS 65. And that's if you're using, I know in the WISP world that specifically these are used a fair amount. And so if you are looking for those LMR 195s and you really want to make sure they're watertight, we are one of the only companies that offer a solution there. So that is available to you as well. The last thing to mention on cables, or one of the last things, I guess, is we offer custom cables as well. We've had people come to us and ask for things as long as 40 foot, different connections, one connection on one side, different on the other. We offer all those things. So you have different cable types, different connectors, different cable lengths, and then you can choose your weatherproofing. We typically do either the cold shrink or the boots. However, and that's largely, I guess I should say, because the slide lock is difficult to do. It has to match perfectly. If there's a need there, we can obviously address that as well. But those are our cable assemblies, and they offer incredible results. We test all of them before they leave the factory, and it's definitely something to consider if you are looking at rolling something out and you need new cables and obviously weatherproofing with it. Definitely give that a look. And I know DoubleRadius has some of those on their website right now. Any questions on cables and all that before I wrap things up here?
Cameron, I think one last question. Someone's looking for a product to seal the square flange of the connector. Would the solution there be the magic tape?
Yeah, most likely. Yeah, getting a square flange is going to be difficult. So yeah, I'd probably just use the magic tape, and that's a good example of where and when you would use it.
Any other questions?
Well, I'll just wrap up some thoughts here real quick, and that way, if anyone has some questions, please get them in before we finish here. But to wrap things up, the number one reason for maintenance costs is almost always going to be bad weatherproofing. And so make sure you're avoiding that problem by making the right weatherproofing choice from the beginning and cutting down your maintenance costs. I mean, if cutting down maintenance costs saves big telecom companies billions of dollars, imagine the impact it could have on you. And you just have to have the right approach in mind. So make sure your weatherproofing reduces your maintenance, reduces your costs, and as it does so, it's going to just improve your bottom line. And with that said, like I kind of mentioned earlier, you can go to the DoubleRadius website and you can check out a few of our products there. You see the cold shrink, a couple cables, the magic tape. There's lots of options available out there that you can use specifically through DoubleRadius. And kind of as a thank you for everyone signing up today and coming to the webinar and joining us, we created a link for you to request a sample. So if you go to the Gamma Electronics website, gammaelectronics.net/double-radius-sample, you can check out some of the weatherproofing products. You can request any of the 4 that we talked about today: the cold shrink, the boot, the slide lock, or the magic tape. You can get a sample, and Lisa will help facilitate that, and will communicate with DoubleRadius so that they can kind of further your questions about those products, and Lisa can help there as well. And then hopefully, we want feedback when we send out these samples. One of the reasons we do it is because we want to make sure if there are ways that we can improve them, if there's new things we should be looking at, we want that feedback. And with that said, you can email me if you have any questions, and specifically, you can also email Lisa. She's probably the best bet here at Gamma in terms of communicating if you're a WISP and any issues on the WISP market. She is fantastic. She will be easily able to address any of your questions. So there's her email, mine as well, if you have any questions for me. And thank you again for joining us. Any questions before we wrap things up here?
I don't see any new questions. One of the questions before you answered it was available through distributors, and so thanks for showing the DoubleRadius site. Yes, they are available.
Absolutely.
And I think that.
And I believe DoubleRadius might also be sending out that link with the sample request there. So make sure to check that out, and yeah, make sure to request those samples. Go try them out.
Great. Yeah, thanks, Cameron. Yeah, it looks like it's a wrap. I don't see any other questions. Certainly, if there are more questions, feel free to reach out to DoubleRadius or to Cameron or Lisa. As we close out, as Cameron said, please take a minute to fill out the survey that will pop up on your screen. On that survey, there is the link for the free sample. So everyone stay safe and have a great day. Appreciate you attending.
All right, thanks everyone.
Thanks, Cameron. Thanks, Lisa.